Hello, I'm Ryan Hamilton. I'm an associate professor of marketing at the Goizueta Business School at Emory University. In a few moments, I'll be inviting up Mary Slaughter from North Highland. We're going to talk to you today about business experimentation as a discipline. So we're going to start by talking about the way that we should come to know things, the way that we should learn things. I've got here the scientific method. The scientific method is responsible for why we're having this conversation the way that we are and not in a thatched roof hut somewhere. This is the way that we advance, the way that we learn things. We start with some theory about the way things should work. We develop some hypothesis, which is a testable, falsifiable prediction. We then test that, and that informs us as to whether the theory is pretty good or whether we should replace it with something better. This is not the way we tend to make decisions in businesses. It tends to look something more like the business method. We don't like theories in the business world. We think we can get around those because theories are too impractical. We want something that we can ground more in experience. Unfortunately, what we replace theory with is something that's not better or even equivalent. It's usually something that we don't even examine or try to determine if it's worthy of acting on. We have these intuitions about the way the world should work. We've got some experiences. We've got some superstitions. And from there, we run straight to an action. And unfortunately, because we're acting and not testing, we never then get this feedback loop where we're informed about whether what we're trying is actually informing this intuition or superstition that we had in the first place. And the result is very little progress often. We don't refine our understanding, we just act. Now, this move away from scientific understanding and relying on this business methodology for learning things is based on two self-deceptions. We believe that we already understand what's driving the behavior of other people. And that those other people can be our customers, they can be our fellow employees, they can be management, but we think we know what's really driving this. This is that superstition aspect, this intuition. We feel like we already know, and so we don't need to examine that. We don't need to test it, we don't need to prove it. The second way that we deceive ourselves when we're making decisions in business is that we believe that once we act, we will know whether our decisions are actually successful or not afterwards. And the reality is, unless we start off planning to test things rigorously, we are almost certainly not going to know. We're not going to know. We're not going to understand. Most of the actions that we take in business, again, whether external facing, whether talking to customers, whether internal facing in terms of the training that we implement, most of it's going to fall into this gray area where yeah, it probably improved things a little bit or made things a little bit worse a little bit, but unless we've established a way of testing that beforehand, we're really not going to know whether it worked or not. That's the core of experimentation. So experimentation as a business discipline rests on a few key principles that are derived from a scientific understanding of the way the world works. One is that we should start with some kind of testable hypothesis, some kind of outcome that we're hoping to achieve, something that will inform us about the underlying processes. The second is that we should test multiple things concurrently. So we should have conditions. There could be a control condition where we don't change anything, or we could test multiple strategies against each other to see which one will work better. We should also have some way of testing the outcomes so that we can know whether things worked. And that should be planned out beforehand, before we start. Ideally, we'll have some kind of randomization or control mechanism where we assign different people or different groups to conditions. That'll help rule out a lot of alternative explanations. If we employ this experimental methodology, then we can make better decisions. So, where does that leave you as a Chief Learning Officer? I'm going to argue that you can improve the way that your business operates through experimentation in two ways. One is that you can train people on the scientific method. So it turns out that testing things in a scientific way is really counterintuitive. That is not the way that we are designed to operate as human beings. In fact, we went thousands and thousands of years of making decisions improperly by not using the scientific method. That's what we're good at as people. Using science and using this experimental methodology requires explicit training. You're in a position to do that for the people in your organization. You can give them the tools of experimental design, of data analysis, so that they can go through this process themselves and improve the way that they're making decisions. You can apply this methodology to yourself. If you're interested in knowing which of several possible training regimes is going to work best, you can actually test that in a scientific method instead of relying on your own intuition about what's likely to work best given your set of people. The other way that chief learning officers can help with this is by trying to educate your organizations in the culture of experimentation. This, again, is not intuitive. It's not the way people typically go about things. Usually when we enact some initiative within a business, we want to reward a winner and punish a loser. If you come up with some suggestion and that suggestion doesn't work out, it's evidence that you don't know what you're talking about. That is antithetical to a culture of experimentation, which recognizes there are a lot of things we don't know, that even reliable theories have exceptions. And so the culture of experimentation is one that embraces failures of new initiatives that are tested in rigorous ways, because even those failures tell us something. They provide us with some information. So with that, I'm going to trade things off to Mary Slaughter from North Highland Consulting, who's going to wrap a more practical set of experiences around these lofty ideas of experimentation. So with that, Mary?
Great. Thank you, Ryan. Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here with us today. Thank you, Ryan, for that sweet intro. I appreciate the practicality of it. Actually, Emory is a strategic partner with us at North Highland for our educational purposes, particularly in leadership development. And I love the idea of thinking about how do we tackle the problems that we have at work today, but in a more methodical way. So the first question I have up that I pose for everyone is, how can we purposefully experiment with workplace learning? And I think learning is in a unique place to be able to do that, because we have the chance to look at different problems, at different instructional methodologies, at different channels for the distribution of that content, and we can do all of those things at the same time and see which ones resound with our audiences and which ones have the most impact in the business where we're working. There was one example I was sharing with Ryan not too long ago about a time in my career where we were trying to figure out how to tackle technical training for our sales force. And one of the big issues we were struggling with was what we would do with our subject matter experts. And we created 4 or 5 different disciplines for conveying this information to our workforce. And at the very end of the day, what we figured out was there was an element we had never planned for, and that was the sense of those deep technical experts not actually being comfortable being able to present in a video-enabled environment. And we had created great structure and great process around it, along with 3 or 4 other distribution channels for that content. And lo and behold, to find out that our facilitators and our instructors, as a SME, they weren't professional trainers, they just weren't comfortable in that medium. So this testing idea, taking a hypothesis, trying to figure out what will work and what won't, I think has real relevance in workplace learning for us. Something else I'd like to mention is how neuroscience has begun to inform all of us in what we're doing in the learning and development field. This slide is pulled from the Neuroleadership Institute, which is headquartered in New York. Many of you may know this work, but there's a model around, it's called the SCARF model, and it's about moving from an away state to a toward state. And in other words, when you're experimenting with something, if you don't make it explicit in an organization, as Ryan said, sometimes failure is viewed as an extreme negative, and people will do anything and everything they can to avoid the failure component. And so what the neuroscience tells us is if we can precondition the environment to let folks know that we are testing things, that it is a hypothesis, that we're trying new ideas, and it's okay to try and fail, and then sometimes you've probably all heard the phrase, fail fast, fail forward, learn from your failures. And that's what the neuroscience is telling us today, is that we can create environments where testing and experimenting can be viewed positively, a toward state, as opposed to the brain feeling that it's a negative state, that I'm going to be punished for something if I don't have all the answers when I start out. What I'd like to share with you, though, is a bit of a real-time experiment that we have going on at North Highland. North Highland is a management consulting firm, and I have the pleasure of serving as their chief people officer, but my roots are in learning and development, so I have a long-standing passion for this. And as a business, we were struggling with a few things. We wanted to figure out how to reinvigorate a culture for ourselves of innovation and a bit of an entrepreneur environment inside of an organizational context. We definitely were looking to drive greater talent capabilities, but with a commercial mindset, always looking to drive profitability for the firm, looking to how we could capitalize on the client trends and market trends that we were seeing, and last of all, monetize something for the firm. We wanted to go beyond the current offerings that we had, and we thought, how can we connect learning and development to actually thinking of new ideas to take to the marketplace? So it was called The Big Idea, and actually that was the name of the program. We were looking for something fresh and new. And these were the three questions that we posed to our employee base. Question one was, do you have a great idea for a new business or product that you'd like to bring forward? Do you need the funding to get it started? And do you have what it takes to be an entrepreneur? So essentially posing the question at the early stages of experimentation, could we bring forward ideas to test and see if they could work in the marketplace for us? And to Ryan's point earlier, this for us will be a multi-year discipline, because we're going to take different ideas over time, try them out in the marketplace, and see which one of those actually validate the hypothesis and maybe even theories that we had. Here's how it worked out, and from a process standpoint. So we asked our employee base to submit ideas for us, and we had about a 60-day window that we gave people to give us feedback. They had to have a high-level business plan, and then in today's contemporary world of video-enabled learning, we asked people to do a 3-minute promo for themselves as to why they thought their idea was a great idea. Then we started looking for the real gems. We had roughly 50 ideas that came forward in terms of business potential for us to consider. We shortlisted down to something less than a list of 10 for our semifinalists, and then provided each of them with $30K worth of seed money, $30,000 of seed money, to be able to flesh out those ideas and come forward with a more detailed plan for us. Inside of consulting, many of you know that our time is our money, like in many professional services firms. So we made sure we balanced that with our employees to give them time to pursue these ideas, and we gave them a dedicated coach to be able to think through it. We shortlisted down even further, down to 3 finalists, held a very interesting, fascinating, engaging, large event where those individuals came forward and they were able to present their ideas to a panel of judges. And the panel of judges were not internal. We picked external people. We had a venture capitalist, we had someone from a business school, we had someone from the workplace already out in the marketplace today, someone running a business. And we had those sort of 3 perspectives that came together. And they basically did a formal pitch to see who would be the winner. And we did select that winner. The idea that came forward that finally was selected was actually awarded $300,000 in seed money to get started. And from that, they get marketing and media support as well, too. And we're actually going to form a new LLC, a new enterprise dedicated just to this particular idea. That's what we know. We're at the very early stages of this. This is something that we've just done within this calendar year. And so we're at the point now where we're getting the business up and running and to see what it's actually going to create and produce for North Highland. But I'll tell you, here's what we don't know. And to Ryan's point about experimentation, part of the joy of experimentation is learning what you don't know. So what we don't know is what additional resources that we're going to need to continue to have this idea thrive and be productive and see if it will actually have commercial value in the marketplace. We don't know precisely what impact this is going to have on the individual or the team's day jobs. So they're not leaving North Highland, they're not leaving their current role, but they're taking on an additional role to help grow and build a business. And last, the ultimate in the experimentation is we don't really know if we picked the winner yet. We had some marvelous ideas from 50 down to 10 to 3 to 1. And our hope is that we, with all the insight and expertise that we had in the room and in the process, that we've picked something that will work. But it is an experiment for us. So the proof will be in what the business results are for this particular idea. And then in the years to come, as we grow and build different capabilities in the firm, we'll see how experimentation is really working for us as a discipline. So with that, we'd like to thank you for your time, that you were here with us today. It's a great chance to expand your thinking as Chief Learning Officers about the ways you can take the content that you're delivering, the channels that you're distributing, the people that you're exposing to, the audiences that you're tackling, and look for multiple ways to get to those individuals and try new ideas, test them out, and give yourself permission to succeed and to fail a little bit along the way. Thank you.